Hello, my name is Ken Cleaver and I teach history classes. Oftentimes when I'm starting a semester, I'll write the word history up on the board and I'll ask the students, so what does this word mean? It's interesting, it's a word that we use every day, but I often get two different responses from students. On the one hand, the first answer that usually comes up is anything that's happened in the past. And then if I pry a little bit deeper, people will say, well, yeah, it's not just the things that happened in the past. When we're talking about history, we're talking about a story of what happened in the past. There are two words for history in the German language. Now, I'm not a native German speaker, so correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I've been teaching. There's the word History, which sounds a lot like the English word history, but it ends with an IE in the German language and with a Y in the English language. History is anything that's happened in the past. It could be a thought, it could be a word, it could be an action. It's anything that's happened in the past. That is what they call history. But they have another word for history, and it's Geschichte. Geschichte is the story that's told about the things that have happened in the past. Now, there is a definite thing called history of what has happened in the past, but when we think about history as a story that's being told, it's interesting, it's not quite the same thing. I mean, we don't tell everything that there is to tell about what's happened in the past. I want you to think about, for example, what you were doing just prior to watching this video. That's part of the past, it's part of history. But if I were to ask you the question, tell me what you were doing before you started watching this video, I would be asking you to select certain things that you were thinking or saying or doing and make them into a story that you think I'm asking about, that you think I'm interested in. So not only have we answered the question today, what is history, but I'm going to ask you this question as well. Is there any such thing as telling a perfect story? I mean, is there any such thing as perfect Geschichte, so to speak? And I would suggest, no, there's really not, at least not for human beings. You see, in order to understand everything that's happened in the past, even the thing that you were doing right before you started watching this video, you would have to have a perfect understanding of everything that came before you started that event, everything that was happening in that event, and everything that resulted because of that event. In other words, you would have to be omniscient or all-knowing. So we might say that God, who knows all things, is the only one who could tell a perfect story because he's the only one who has a perfect understanding of everything that happened in the past, everything that happens in any given moment, and everything that happens related to it in the future. Now, when we're trying to tell a good story, we're not trying to be super comprehensive in every imaginable way to describe everything there is to know about a certain event. That doesn't make for a good story. A good story is going to be appealing to the listener. So it's not just a matter of collecting as many facts as you can about what happened, but it's about selecting certain facts that you're going to include into your story, and it's also about deselecting certain facts that don't belong in the story. If you've researched a certain event in history and you think you have a good understanding of what came before it, what happened in the moment, and then what resulted after it, that's okay, go ahead and write that story, but make sure you're writing to the particular audience who asked you the question. If I'm a teacher in a class and I'm telling a story to my students in a classroom, I'm asking the question, how old are these students? What are their backgrounds? What is their interest in my particular topic? For instance, I teach a lot about the history of the Christian Church, and so I might be talking about Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, Protestantism, or other movements that have associated themselves in one way or another with the Christian Church. As I do so, I might be asking the question, what is the denominational background of the people that I'm teaching at any given moment? Because there might be one event in history, but maybe I'm going to cover it a certain way when I'm talking to a group of Presbyterians, another way when I'm I'm telling the story to Russian Orthodox, and even maybe a third way when I'm talking to Roman Catholics about the same event in history. It's not that I'm trying to hide anything from history, but I think telling a really good story means you understand something about your audience as well. You want to tell an appealing story or something that's going to be of interest to them. So when you're telling history, always say the things that are true. Never make up something. Always make sure that you're telling the story as truthfully as you know it. But be humble and realize that you're not God. You don't have a perfect understanding of everything that happened before the event, during the event, and as a result of the event. Do your best to understand those things. The study of how we come to know things with a degree of certainty is called epistemology. So we're asking that historians will think epistemologically. How am I certain about these facts that I'm writing or I'm telling in my oral story perhaps of what happened? Am I selecting facts that are appealing to the reader? Do they have a certain theme to them that makes sense from past to the event to effects of the event? And just tell a really good story in that way. But if you've ever opened up a history book and you've seen in the preface or you've seen in the introduction that the author says, oh, all the history books that have ever, been written on this particular topic were so subjective, but finally I'm going to tell an objective story of what happened here. I'm going to include all the facts because they've never been told before. Just say baloney. Nobody besides God alone can tell a perfect story, because nobody besides God alone is omniscient in that he understands everything that happened in the past, everything that's happening in the event, and everything that happens as a result of the event. Only God knows that every reader perfectly, or every listener perfectly, who's listening to the story. And only he has that divine perspective. But do the best you can. It's not that you can't tell the truth because you're not God. Just because you don't get it perfectly doesn't mean you shouldn't tell a story. Just admit to people when you're telling a story, this is the perspective I'm coming from, and I'm trying to tell you a story based on what I think you'll like to hear. That's my lesson for today. God bless you. Have a great day.